welcome back to Their Side Live. We're here in Geelong, or just outside of Geelong, at a very secret location. And we're here this week to chat to a very prominent member of the Geelong skate scene back in the day, and also even more recently. He is the Superman of sweepers, the gentleman of giants, the one and only Al Miller. Thank you very much. Way, clapping for Al Miller. Yay!
Yay.
Yeah,
Rent a crowd.
You can't find good help these days. I'd like to say thanks to Jess and Adrian for being behind the scenes today, and welcome, Al.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Cool.
Awesome to be here.
So we're in this very secret location, and it's Anomaly.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's probably not that secret, but it's secret to some.
I have heard that some people have actually, through the, around the skate scenes, and I know Adrian was mentioning that today, that some people he skated with just recently have said, "Oh, there's a scene along, and they don't let anyone go and skate it." But I guess if you're friends with the Carve and Grind crew, sometimes you're allowed to come and skate it.
Yeah, we have regular sessions here all the time. It's pretty cool, and if you're up for it, and you know one of the crew that's involved with the ramp, there's no reason you can come and skate it. You can't come and skate it.
Cool. Now, just to start off, so when did it start for you? Tell me when that started.
I reckon it was around when I was old, so probably 1975. And I reckon, just like a lot of kids back then, I took my set of strap-on roller skates apart with a little wing nut in between them and screwed them to a plank of wood that was in the shape of a skateboard, and was playing around with that in the street. So I reckon I was about 10 years old in primary school when that happened. And it sort of progressed from there, and I think one Christmas must have been when I was 11. It was before I went to secondary school. I got a fiberglass Condor skateboard, and they sold them at Clark Rubber back then, and I remember having one of these and thinking, this is the bee's knees. It doesn't get much better than that, And we used to skate up and down the street. There was probably a couple of kids in my street that had skateboards. It was just pushing up and down the street. There was no moves or anything like that. That was pretty cool. Yeah. And it all kind of changed a little bit, I think, when I got into secondary school, and probably met up with a couple of older guys. So I used to knock around with a guy called Adrian Ben, who was in my year, and we'd sort of been to primary school, and his older brother, Nigel, and a few of his mates were into surfing, and they'd sort of got into surfing and were starting to get into skating, where they were taking those surf moves, into the driveways and that sort of thing. And I think that's how I really got hooked with the skating, and I started surfing at the same time. We were pretty lucky. I think year 8 and 9 at school, we had a surfing program at school as well. So every Wednesday afternoon for sport.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we got to go surfing, so that was pretty cool.
So what year was that?
That would have been year 9, but we'd been skating and building ramps and stuff like that. My earliest memory of a ramp, and this is still when I had my Condor skate park, skateboard, was it was probably a 3/4 inch 8x4 piece of chipboard that we closed the gates in my driveway and leant the chipboard up against the ramp, and came across the two driveways that were sort of a little bit embanked on either side of the road, and pushed like crazy across the road, and then tried to go up and do a kick turn on the 8x4 piece of chipboard. That lasted a few weeks until it broke, obviously, with a fair bit of use, but that was with the same guys, And I think from there we just started building ramps, and there was down at the Corio village, there was a car park, venture car park, that had a couple of banked or steep ramps into the car park, which was good. So we used to try and surf that. And I think if you have a look on the Carve and Grind website, in Carve and Grind Facebook page, in the videos, there's a video that Roy Green has put together called The Vault.
Oh, cool.
And it shows the early days of that sort of skating in Corio, and it shows the car park there and shows everything else. Even got footage from the opening day at Corio Bowls and stuff.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So that's on the Carbon Grind Facebook page?
Facebook page, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so are we talking late 70s?
Yeah, we're sort of talking mid-70s at this stage. So we're probably building a couple of ramps. There was a good crew in Corio. We didn't know that anything else was going on anywhere, not even on the other side of Geelong. Just trying to think back some of the guys. So the key guys for me were Adrian Ben, Nigel Ben, Mick Hughes, Hughesy, Roy Green. Who else was there? Michael Keys, I think. Then we had the Blaxell brothers, Mike Vanderbroek, who, and I'll talk about him later. He got me back into skating just recently. So Dooley, and we were just building stuff and building ramps, and that group grew and grew and grew until it was probably about, from memory, about 12 or 15 of us. And we decided, and I think the Corio Skateboard Club was formed round about, I'm going to say 78.
Yeah.
It would have been 78, and we petitioned the council. And then we found out that there was a Geelong Skateboard Club as well, which was really cool. And they had, there was guys like Paul Kingston, Graham Thornton, who was a legendary skater in Geelong as well. Who else was out there? Damien Glennon, and then over the years, over that next 3 or 4 years, so that late 70s piece, Wiffo's a classic guy, somehow we hooked up with Wiffo and we were skating all different places. There was a pool at the Geelong College pool that would get emptied in wintertime, and it was an upside down pyramid pool, so you could carve around in that pool, and then every now and then with enough speed, go and convert, right? But there was always water in the bottom. There was the Finesford pipe at the same time, so we all used to ride our bikes and skate from all over town, all over different places around town, and go and skate the Finesford pipe. And I remember hiding a set of box cutters or a set of bolt cutters in the boxthorn bushes to be able to cut around the bottom of the fence to sneak in, and getting chased out of there a few times as well. So yeah, it was a pretty good scene down here. And then, and then I think it was late 78, early 79, we raised some money at the Rotary Club of Corio, said to the council that they would chuck in some money if the council put in some money to build a skate park. And lo and behold, 1979, late 1979, the Corio Bowls were built.
Wow.
Which was just huge, and at the time, I reckon the Corio Bowls were probably the best skate park in Australia.
Really?
Well, it definitely was for us and anything that we'd seen. Yeah, it's just a really cool time.
So what was that like, I guess, from, public perception can be that skaters are a bunch of outlawed kind of, misfits. What was it like for you guys? Were you at that stage where you just thought, wow, this is amazing that the council are putting, are building all these things for us, or was it more just like, wow, cool, awesome, another park for us to go to?
No, it was just, we couldn't believe we were getting it, right? Yeah. We're so wrapped. And we were, and I'll say it, we were little shits when we were younger, because we used to go and pinch wood and stuff like that. We used to, we weren't supposed to be in the Geelong College, ground skating the pool. We were, cutting the wire fence.
Yeah.
The oldies are watching this, they're going to have a heart attack, because, but, you had to do, like, you broke the law to actually go and skate some of the stuff that you wanted to skate. The old Civic car park in Geelong that's still there. We used to sneak in there when it was closed and just run down the car park, and, you just did that stuff. Because there was nothing to skate, and you had to go and make your own stuff or find it.
Yeah, yeah. Was it about skating back then? Was it about hanging out with friends, or was it about being misfits, or was it about just getting out there and outside, and what was it about?
I don't know. I think back then for me, at the time it was about surfing, right? And I think for our probably group in Corio, which seems weird because we're 25 k's from the closest surf beach. But for us, it was about surfing, and then when we couldn't go surfing, we could probably it was like we'd just sort of taken those surf moves and just playing around on the footpath and banks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I remember, for when we got into the skating and that sort of thing, and I remember that we used to rush down to the Corio Village to the news agency and get, buy the Tracks magazine.
Yeah.
Right? And not only just for the surfing, but looking for what's happening in the skate scene, And one of my strongest memories was always getting that Tracks magazine and looking for the skate section and seeing guys like Wedge.
Oh, really?
Johnny McGrath, Adrian Jones and stuff like that were sort of up and around Sydney and in that place where the magazine and the photos were being taken of these guys, and they were skating Pimble Pool and stuff, and there'd be just photos. And I'd always go for go to wherever the skate section was first and see these guys. And was just awesome. But then the American skate mags come out. Now there was always about a 6 or an 8 month delay for those, and they were pretty expensive, back then. So a couple of us sometimes would put our pocket money together, and there'd only be 1 or 2 copies. So if you could get one first, and you could get that, get that copy. And I remember because Nigel and Mick Hughes lived pretty much closest to the Corio Village. So we'd come back with a skateboard magazine and we'd sit there and all gather around it and look at all the photos and work out how these guys were doing that stuff. Like, how do you get into that position that's upside down and grinding and stuff like that?
Because I guess I remember speaking to Tony Hallam about it, and it was more about just sections like the high speed photography. It was all, that's how you kind of got to find out how to do a certain move or something, wasn't it? Or
a couple of sequence shots.
Shot
in the in the mag, it sort of gave you a better idea. But most of the time, it was just a still.
Right.
And I often wonder sometimes whether they were actually, back in the days, whether they were actually makes or not. Because, but I reckon they would have had to been. But but that was a rad thing, and I think. Because surfing was hard for us, we had to get somebody to take us down there, so wait on somebody's parents and that sort of thing. So we ended up doing a lot more skating, and that changed when we all got our licences too, because we ended up down the beach a lot more than.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, because getting down there, longboards, I guess back then.
No, we were when we were surfing, sort of progressed into those shorter boards. So we were talking 6 footers, 5.9s. I had a board that was 5.1 at one stage, a Southern Juice 5.1 surfboard, and it was as loose as on the waves, and you couldn't surf it any more than 3 or 4 foot.
Yeah, but I guess trying to get those down to the beach, as opposed to just getting bored and walking down the street to the car park and stuff, was a lot easier. Or the mate's place and putting the board up against somewhere and trying to replicate those.
Yeah, no, that's right. And Nigel, I think Nigel Ben and Dooley, Mick Vanderbroek, I think they were the first ones to get their licence. So, it was generally all of the younger guys poling in the back of their wag. Nigel had a Kingswood wagon, and
awesome.
And Dooley had a red Kingswood panel van as well. So it was sort of, it was all in the back of the 3 or 4 people laid in the back of the wagon and the van with the boards and stuff like that. It was pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that was sort of 79. What happened to the 80s? Did you progressed in your skating?
Yeah, a little bit. So, we talked about the Corio Skateboard Club, and I've got to say, here's an original T-shirt. This is Nigel's original T-shirt for the Corio Skateboard Club. I don't know whether you can see that. Just even holding this brings back a heap of memories. And I think it was March 1980 was when the Corio Bowls were officially opened.
Oh, right.
And we put on a good demo. Well, we all thought it was a pretty good demo back then, and we had both the Geelong Skate Club and the Corio Skate Club putting on the demo there. So we were in red T-shirts, and those guys were in white T-shirts. And
that's awesome.
It was pretty good.
You still have some photos of that day?
Or? There's a couple of photos in the video, The Vault.
Oh yeah.
Right. There's some good footage of that. I troweled through some photos trying to find some stuff, and I have got some stuff here just to jog the memory, because I'm just about pushing 54 and trying to remember 40 odd years ago.
Yeah.
And again, I've got, you know, my version of what happened went back then is, you know, will be different to everybody else's. But, you know,
but I mean, I guess this is why this is, you know, it's called their side because it's your side of the story. It's not about, you know, getting everyone and you know, so it is what it is for you.
Yeah. So the 80s cool, and with the opening of the Corio Bowls, you know, and as the word got out there, you know, we saw more and more skaters come from Melbourne, and and this is where we started to learn about more skaters that we hadn't heard about, you know, and yeah, I've got distinct memories of you know, the Radland guys coming down, and they were camped in the creek, right, at the bowls, and there might have been a little bit of early biffo, right, about, you know, locals only sort of thing. You know, there was some I know there was some interesting conversations, and I don't know whether anybody else sort of remembers that, but it's one of the things that sort of sticks out with me, and I'm pretty sure that I've, you know, one day that I rocked up there and Johnny McGrath was in like this hammock thing, hanging from the tree that he'd camped down there, and they had baked bean tins and stuff all over the place. It was pretty cool. But in the 80s saw, you know, what was really interesting for me is most of the guys that I'd been sort of skating with in the late 70s, you know, they all sort of started to progress to get their licences and stuff, and more went surfing, and, you know, ended up, you know, starting families and a whole range of other stuff. So what I got to see is another wave of skaters coming up that were, you know, starting to be more switched on, you know, and better skaters. So, you know, I know that Wiffo was in the mix. He was, you know, Shane Whiffen, he was there. There was guys like Tim Ingalls. There was another couple of guys, Mike and I can't remember the other guy's name, but we ended up calling them the Leyland brothers. Right. And Tony Hallam talks about these guys all the time. I know he does. They used to rock up with an old Falcon, sedan, right? And they'd pull these big kick-ass speakers out. This is at Corio. Pull these big kick-ass speakers out of the back, like they stood about 4 foot high. They had a generator, or they powered it somehow, and they had the music going and everything like that. And they would just make everything. They'd made portable ramps and everything. And I'd love to get hold of these guys, but you know.
Wow, because I've heard Tom mention the brothers,
So, and that was sort of that first part of the 80s, you know, and Tim Ingalls was another standout skater. Back then there was a bunch of them. Another guy, Anthony Swanborough, him and I worked together. Greg Shields was around at that time. You know, and there was a few skaters that were good and local around Corio, and we just used to skate all the time, surf and stuff like that. I forgot to mention earlier that we had a couple of kneeboarders. I've seen so Paul Manson used to be one of the better skaters in the late 70s, and he was, you know, I would probably say out of all of us at that time, he was probably the best out of all of us. And he had a younger brother, Ross, or his nickname was Nux, and Nux just used to do this insane stuff on the kneeboard, big 3 foot airs, you know, 2 to 3 foot airs. Big hand plants, and I seen him actually do full backflips in the keyhole bowl, where he'd just go out and flip out backwards and land fakie. So in the later 80s years, there was another guy, Dwayne O'Dwyer, who he's sort of poking around now. He was riding a kneeboard as well, and he was doing all right. Yeah, but getting into the 80s and the waves of skaters then, you know, it was really interesting. And a lot of the guys dropped off, and I just had a real passion for skating. I kept skating and kept going, and there's another wave of kids coming through. And we got to the mid-80s, and, you know, there's half pipes starting to pop up all over the place.
Is that when they popped up?
Yeah, I reckon, well, I don't know the exact timing, but, you know, it was somewhere around the mid-80s that the half pipes and that sort of still really started to come into fruition. And I remember there was a group of guys in Highton, which is a suburb of Geelong, and they had a really good half pipe, and all of a sudden it popped in up in a public space. So I don't know whether the council bought it off them or what happened there,
okay,
but
yeah.
I just remember this half pipe being up near the tennis courts and footy oval in Highton, and we just turned up. Here's a group of guys from Geelong that we hadn't really known about. They were just shredding this half pipe. They were just doing insane stuff, and that was Jamie Ellis. Jamie Ellis and him and I skated together, ended up skating together for a long time. There's another guy, David Griffiths, who, he was just insane on the board, and he's the only person that I ever saw consistently do the channel at the keyhole at Corio.
Oh, you mean boost it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So there's myths about, how many people have ever done that channel. This guy's David Griffiths is the only guy that I ever see consistently do that channel. And I reckon I've tried that channel about over 1,000 times and only made it across probably twice or 3 times, right? But another group of skaters in Geelong that we sort of was just doing their own thing, and we sort of eventually all came together, and Jamie and I started skating together a lot, and we started to travel too. There's a little bit of travel in there, and.
Was it the Melton Skate Park? Was that open at
Yeah,
the
so the Melton Skate Park, that was probably, I'm going to say that's got to be late 70s too, so around 78, because my mum and dad there was a couple of times I really had to twist their arm to take me down there. So that was before I had a licence, so that must have been early 80s, I reckon, around Melton. But we used to go down there a bit, but it was so hard to get to.
Right, okay.
Because you couldn't get public transport, and you really had to talk somebody's parents into driving you down.
So was it more about staying around Corio, Geelong? Was there anything at Torquay at that point, or was there?
Torquay was really mid 80s, so probably 85, 86.
Okay.
But there was a number of half pipes popping up.
Okay.
Right. So I remember Wiffo moved into a place, I think, with a girlfriend at the time in Geelong West Newtown, right, and didn't have very much of a backyard, but all of a sudden there was a half pipe in there, right, and you'd roll in off the garage roof, right. It was one of these things, and so we'd have sessions there, and then there was a guy in Leopold that I remember that we wanted to build a ramp that sort of heard about us, and I remember Jamie driving his Nissan Pulsar up onto the ramp to bend the plywood so we could screw it in. And
really,
this thing was only about 8 foot wide as well. But there was these ramps just starting to pop up, so everybody was sort of going away from the skate park Corio and getting into the half pipes and that sort of thing. And I reckon it was about must have been about 85. I reckon 86, probably 86 that I think Torquay. Torquay was built.
Yeah. So that was the
big vert ramp.
Yeah, right, okay.
And my timing is probably going to be a little bit out, but
So you got into you were sponsored it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was.
What happened there?
Yeah, it was Speaky's surf shop that's still in town in Geelong now. Were looking after us kids in the late 70s. So we'd go in there and we'd tell him what we're doing and that sort of thing, and he would give us discounts right from the front end. But I'd probably say early 80s. Terry said to me, he goes, I think I'd competed in a couple of local comps and stuff like that. I'd done all right. And Terry said that he'd throw a deck at me, and that sort of progressed, and I ended up getting full setups and stuff. And then he talked to me about setting up a team, right?
Awesome.
We want to put a team together. So I reckon that was probably pushing towards the mid-80s.
Okay, and how old were you then?
I was getting to about 20. So I had my licence by this stage.
Yeah.
I was in an apprenticeship at the Ford Motor Company. Also had to have a job, to earn a living. But so he asked me to have a look at a range of skaters, and I think I got to pick up to 6 or 7 skaters that he'd put on the team, and we got a Speaky's skate team top, which looks remarkably like this one, and I don't know whether you can see that in view, but back in the day, if you got one of these things, in Geelong, you were doing all right,
That's awesome.
got looked after, and that team changed, and the team stayed for many years. And I think it was only probably maybe 5 to 7 years ago that they stopped having a team.
Really?
Yeah.
So 2000
yeah, and they've sponsored and looked after skaters in this town since the mid-70s, and they still do.
That's awesome.
You know, they still look after the locals that go in there, and you know,
that's pretty cool.
Give a bit of a discount here and there. It's all right.
That's pretty cool. So how long? So you were in that. So you were in that kind of team for how long?
I think I've always been in the team. And I still get treated like part of the family when I walk in there. You know, it's just really cool. But yeah, I was in that team right up till '93 when I stopped skating.
Okay.
So, but you know, I'm just sort of winding back. I'm trying to do that chronological thing, you know. And I think there was another wave of skaters in the mid '80s. Sorry. So you know, we're starting to talk about really good skaters coming through. Ash Foster, Simon DeSasio. You know, Sass was a technical guy, like on mini ramps and stuff like that. He could just pull anything off, just unbelievable. You know, then we had the guys like Dean Turner. He was really good. But then Paul Vert, there's another guy, Verdi, and I've got to say, I don't think I've ever seen anybody skate the Corio bowls as good as Verdi has, and that's including some of the pros that have got down there. And I remember the first times, I think it was in '86, '87 maybe, when the pros were actually come down to Torquay, and they were at Corio, and they had...
Bones Brigade, was it?
I think some of them might have been there. I can't remember all the details. The '80s were a bit fuzzy for me.
Tony's got some footage that I've seen enough.
And I remember them sitting there watching Verdi, right, to try and work out the lines that Verdi was using to keep his speed and stuff like that. And so Verdi was another rad skater, and this is this like third or fourth generation of skaters that are coming through, you know, and another, you know, this bloody group of kids that I'm thinking, bloody hell, how am I going to keep up with these guys? You know? Yeah. And another real couple of standouts was Troy Harvey and Travis Pertzel were just insane. Like, they were next level. They were starting to get into that 4 or 5 foot air range, you know, technical tricks, you know, stuff like that. Like, it was, and that was, you know, I'm going to say that was 87, 88, you know, around that time frame. It was good to be part of. I mean, the good thing for me was that none of them had their licence, right? So I got to skate. I got to take them everywhere and skate with them and stuff like that while still having.
And I suppose you were the head. You were the captain or whatever. You know, you were the.
Yeah, it was just like that. It was just, you know, anybody that was a good kid. Yeah. Like, I had really low tolerance for kids that were with attitude and shitty behaviours. But if they were a good kid and, you know, and they were a good skater, I was going to try and, you know, take them skating. And, you know, we used to travel to places like Bo Morris and Morty Alec, and, you know, because they had good, you know, we heard they had good half pipes and stuff, and we've seen it in the mags, and we wanted to go and skate those places. And
was that quite cool to take out of the Geelong, Corio kind of area and go into Melbourne and sort of show off the kids from here?
Yeah, kind of was really tough because the skate scene in Melbourne was really good, you know, and there's so many shredders, you know, in there, and sort of you turn up at a ramp and there's already this local scene, you know, happening, and to try and get in on it, and you had to sort of prove yourself to be able to get a run, because it was Snake City back then, like, and on the platform you just copped some shit, like, you know, if you come off, and, you know, it wasn't nice and civilised like it is around the platform these days for the older guys, but it was, you know, you copped a hide, and if you didn't make it, you know, goofed on something or something like that. So, but it was good, and we had a good time, and, you know, and that sort of thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, what happened after? So you got to sort of the late '80s, early '90s. What happened that it dropped off for you?
Well, interesting. Through that later '80s, I was struggling with the skating a bit. Me and a mate of mine called Dave Collins, him and I decided we'd go and do a trip around Australia.
Oh yeah.
And skate all skated all the different places along the way that we could find, and we ended up in Perth, and I'd heard rumours about this new indoor skate park called the Edge, the Edge Indoor Skate Park in Fremantle. Yeah. So we turned up there, and we were only going to stay in Perth and Fremantle for a week or so, just have a look around, and there was this huge vert ramp in this indoor park, and nobody was skating it. And there was heaps of kids. There was a little bowl and a mini ramp, and there was lots of street obstacles and stuff like that. And there was heaps of people skating everything else except the vert ramp. So I thought I'd have a crack on the vert ramp, you know, as you do. And all of a sudden, everybody stopped skating, and you know, and I remember this is the first day there, and wasn't really doing that much, just having, you know, a couple of airs and stuff like that. And I remember talking to one of the kids, Rowan Cox, at the time over there, and him and I were still really good friends. And I remember him saying, "Shit, nobody ever skates this vert ramp. Like, you know, we don't see anybody skate it." And I ended up working at the at the Edge skate park for around about 6 months. So we hung around in Perth and tried to help them get a few more people in. I think we started a skate school program, learn to skate program over there and that sort of stuff. And I was skating every day, like 2-3 times a day. I was skating. I remember having Tony come over with a few of the other pros and stuff for a couple of demos. I'm pretty sure I've got a pretty embarrassing photo of both Tony and I after a session over there. But because I was skating 2 or 3 times a day, my skating lifted. So by the time I came back in '89, you know, I reckon I'd improved 50%. On what I was when I left, and so I felt like I was back in the mix a bit when I got back. Same sort of thing, just skated around, lots of half pipes and stuff like that, and I started competing a bit in the early '90s, and I was sort of doing okay. And I think it was '92 or '93, in a warm up at a comp in Werribee on the Werribee half pipe. I used to do, I don't know, 1 to 2 foot backside ollies to axle stalls. And it was like a signature thing that I just used to love doing. And I'd never come off one before. And this on warm up, I come out, popped in, my board landed in a little bit, it slipped in, and I went in with it. But as I was sort of heading down, thinking I'm going to bail on my knees, the board was pointing straight up to my crotch, and I thought, right, I'm going to get credit carded here. And I landed with my feet apart, and my right bottom leg just popped out and dislocated my knee. And I remember getting up, and the bottom half of my leg was like swinging in the breeze, and grabbing my shorts and just like flicking my leg, and I remember it going down and popping back in. And I walked around on it for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I thought, you know what, I reckon this is going to be all right. Anyway, they called the warm-ups off and they were going to go into the heat, so I went and sat down, and they called my heat, and I went to get up, and I couldn't walk. Wow. I was done. And I went to the doctors, and they suggested re-knee-cos, and at the time I said, well, you know, if I get a re-knee-co, am I going to be able to get full usage out of it and stuff like that? They basically said, oh, you'll be about 80%. And I said, what if I don't do it? And they said, well, you probably get the same usage out of it, but it'll take a little bit longer. I can't remember having public health insurance or anything back then, so I just decided I was going to try and do it myself. But the damage that I did is that I couldn't kneel on my knee. Wow. And because I couldn't kneel and put any weight on it, I couldn't bail. And if I couldn't bail, I couldn't skate. And that was pretty much it. So I kind of stopped cold turkey. Wow. And I couldn't even handle being around skating. Like if I couldn't do it, I didn't want to be near it. You know. So I probably surfed more than that. I started mountain bike riding as well. And I ended up doing downhill racing on mountain bikes for probably 15 years. Loved that. And snowboarding, got into snowboarding and snowboarded a lot during winter and surfed during summer and got on the downhill bike for 15 odd years.
All these sports seem to be way more,
well, if you can't hurt yourself one way, you got to hurt yourself another, right?
So downhill mountain biking, yeah, that's nasty. Surfing, I've heard of some horrendous injuries. And what was the other one?
Oh, snowboarding.
Snowboarding, yeah. I've snowboarded and just about killed myself a few times. So you actually have the board here that you had when you came off, is that right? So tell us about that.
This is the board that I was riding. This is my, and it sounds a bit weird saying that, you know, this is my last sponsored board, but this is the last setup that I got from Speakies. And this is the board that I was riding when I came off.
Yeah.
It is still set up exactly the same as I set it up.
Really?
I haven't adjusted the trucks or anything like that. So the trucks are tight. It's like,
oh, okay.
They don't turn at all because that's the way we had it when we were doing the skating on the half pipes back then.
And so the trucks are?
They're indies. I don't know what stage they are because I'm not a technical collector. Right? I've still got this board because it just sort of means something to me. Yeah, totally. You know. So, and this. What are the wheels? Vision Hurricanes. Yep. Right. So they were super fast on the steel ramps back then, and the Blind Gonzales, which apparently a lot of people are after these days. Yeah. I keep getting hit up about if I ever want to get rid of it.
I suppose it's got the same bearings in it and you haven't touched anything. So did you, you basically came off on that and you just went, right, put it away.
It's in the shed.
In the shed.
Yeah, and I had a street set up exactly the same as that, but I don't know, somebody asked me if they could borrow it years later and I lent it to them and I never saw it again. I can't even remember who I lent it to. So.
It wasn't the same, was it Gonzales?
It was Vision Gonzales, Indy trucks, Hurricane wheels, but a different geometer.
Yeah.
And looser trucks.
Wow. So someone's sitting out there going, sorry, I haven't given it back.
Well, you know, who knows what happened to it.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. So, okay, so that was pretty unfortunate, but I guess you continued, you didn't stop skating and then just stop. You actually continued on doing other things to keep your interest up.
Yep.
So what happened? Why did you get back into it? And when did you get back into it?
Probably a couple of things. At the time, we just sort of had, I think we'd had both our kids, so Chloe and Noah had come along. I'd gotten back into photography as well, so one of the things I hadn't mentioned is I used to do a lot of skate photography back then.
Oh,
so
okay.
I don't have too many photos of myself. I've got loads of photos of other people that are stashed away. And I got back into photography and that sort of thing, and then there was a couple of things happened, I reckon within probably a couple of months of each other. And one of my mates, Michael Vanderbroek, who I talk about, he lives over in Hobart now, and he gets in contact with me. I think it was around his 50th birthday. He said, we're coming over, going to do the 50th, or something like that. Timing could be out there as well. But I remember him saying, have you still got a skateboard? I'm started skating again, have you still got a skateboard? And I said, yeah, I think I have. I think there's one in the shed. Do you want to borrow it? And he said, no, I want you to come for a skate. And I went, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said, no, come on, man, I've started skating. It's really cool, you know. And him and his wife, Sharon, came over. They were here for the weekend, and I brushed the dust off this thing.
Yeah.
And we went out to Corio.
And how old were you?
I must have been about 48 or 49. Right. So 20 odd years had gone past.
Yeah.
So it was in early 2013 this had happened. And he said, let's go out to Corio, and I went, yeah, all right. Anyway, I remember him and I skating. I reckon we skated for 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I reckon we went about 1.5 feet up the transition and tried to get a couple of our lines back, and we were done. Like, we're so shagged and from not really skating, and my legs were shaking like I was just trembling and everything, and I just couldn't believe it. And I went, and it was then I kind of went, you know what, I'm kind of back in, I'm in.
Yeah.
Right, I want to skate a little bit. And then I reckon it must have been, I don't know, a couple of months after that, I bumped into Flaz.
Oh yeah.
And Jimmy at a pub, and I think I'd had too many drinks. And I hadn't seen Flaz and Jimmy for God knows how long, and they said, oh man, you want to come and check out this thing we're building? It's top secret at the moment. Oh yeah, all right. It turned out to be the park, Geelong, so the big indoor place, right? And it was still under construction, and Flaz and Jimmy and a couple of others had built the vert ramp. And I remember walking in through the back doors one night and seeing this monster of a vert ramp, just going, holy shit, how big is this thing?
Yeah.
And I got to have a couple of little fakies and turns on the bottom, and and
that was it.
That was it. And
wow.
I was back in, and have been loving it.
That's awesome.
It's been good.
And then, because hang on, what year was that?
So I think that was 2013.
Yeah.
So I started 2013.
Okay. Because then, because I remember meeting you in about 2014, maybe, when I first started.
Yep.
So, so when did Carve and Grind come about? And
so, I just sort of caught up a little bit, got on Facebook.
Yeah.
Back then I was just
with the young people.
Yeah, that's right. I was a bit nervous about it, because people find out all this stuff about you. I wasn't that sure about it, and but I think Mike and I had been, conversing through Facebook and stuff like that, and he'd sort of somehow connected with this guy called Peter Rowe in Ballarat. Oh, yeah. And Mike was over one weekend, and we decided we'd actually go and meet Peter at Bacchus Marsh and have a skate with this guy Peter, because he was doing rad double truckers everywhere, photos, and which is really cool. So we got up really early one morning, because I don't think Peter skates after 9 o'clock in the morning. I think it's really early or nothing. So we were down at Bacchus Marsh, and we had a really good session. Just skated the Bacchus Marsh Bowl, and we're all sort of sitting around having a chin wag, and we're talking about creating a Facebook page that we can get in contact with some of the guys that we used to skate with back in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. And we're talking about our skating, and I said, we all sort of agreed that we're just really happy just to have a skate and have a bit of a carve and a grind here and there and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, that's where the name came from.
Yeah, right.
And we said, all right, well, me, Mike, and Peter Rowe said, well, why don't we set this thing up?
That's awesome.
And I think because Mike was a little bit more savvy with Facebook back then, him and Sharon went back to Hobart, we set the group up and just started trying to search for people that we used to skate with and invite them into the group. And it's kind of grown now. It's got about 500 members in it now, and it's a national thing.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's just so good.
So you've kind of taken the Geelong, because I always thought it was just a Geelong kind of.
It was initially. It was supposed to be, Geelong, Ballarat.
Yeah.
I think there was a Ballarat old school skater thing as well. And interestingly enough, not that I knew it at the time, there was different groups. Like Moss was already there. Yeah. It took me a little while to connect into the Moss group, and then Boss started up. But it's interesting because Moss is sort of geographically, it's like southeast sort of Melbourne north sort of thing, and then Boss is kind of Bendigo and the northern suburbs, and then Carve and Grind's sort of southwest.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If that, I don't know how it worked out, but it just sort of, that's how I sort of see it. But we're all sort of members of all the groups anyway. Like if you're in one, you're in the others. Yeah. As well, pretty much. It's pretty cool.
Just a big. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and I've got to say that the Grind group has turned into much more than what I ever expected it to. We talk about men's health and everything like that, and I know that there's been a few people going through some stuff in the group, and I just can't believe how quickly that everybody jumps on board to help them. And I know the same thing happens at Moss in the Moss group, and I know the same thing happens in the Boss group. But it's it's just people ringing up or sending you a message saying, "Hey, you okay? Let's go for a skate. Let's go and do something." And it's turned into something I'd never imagined it to be.
It's just you've just let it go that way.
Yeah, it was interesting to let it go too, right? Even though it hasn't been around for that long, it was just thought about, well, hang on, this is just for us old guys that used to skate together, and then there was more and more interest in it, and and letting it go, letting it get bigger, which has been a good thing because this, it's such a good group.
And you mentioned a lot of guys through, from the 70s up to now. Are many of those guys still skating today? And you know, are there any that have passed? And you know, do you want to talk about any of that?
I can't. From this side, I think we're lucky. Like I can't think of anybody that's passed. There's a couple of guys that I haven't been able to make contact with. So you know, you don't know.
No, that's
they
right,
could just be living somewhere else and not.
Yeah.
You know, not on Facebook and that sort of stuff. But look, there's people that come out. You know, they surface every now and then. You know, Verdi and Troy resurfaced, and they went back, you know, from 0 to 100 in 0.2 seconds, and just seeing these guys get back on the board and stuff like that. And you know, and they've got family stuff and other stuff that they're dealing with, so they sort of come and they've gone again. But you know.
At least they know that they're around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and if whenever they want to age and stuff like that, you know, that's what it is. And it's just been a really, really good group. And, you know, even interesting enough with this group, it's, you know, some of the local, I guess, skate brands and that sort of stuff have actually jumped in and supported the group as well, you know. So, you know, Device Skateboards have been really supportive and, you know, giving stuff to raffle and prizes and thieve trucks, and the park as well looks after us, and Speakies Surf Shop, you know, they look after the Carve and Grind members.
Excite Pro?
Yeah, well, Excite Pro's, I'm really supportive of Excite Pro. It's just, I don't want to, it's not a sales pitch, but it's an Aussie brand. They create a good safety protective product.
Yep.
You know, and I'm all for helping Aussie products get out there and get in the market and stuff like that.
Well, and the good thing is that we're not sponsored by anyone, so we can promote it whoever we want, really.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So, but as I said, the group, Carve and Grind's just been way more than I ever thought it would be. And it's such a rad group. And today down at Ocean Grove, we've got our annual Christmas carve. So we're going to assemble down there later on, and hopefully the rain holds off. And
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Finally, the private part of it. So we've got Anomaly.
The private part.
The private part. No, sorry.
Are you allowed to talk about private parts on this?
Yeah, that shouldn't have gone there. I thought I knew you. Initially, you had 150, which I was fortunate enough to go and have a skate there, considering I can't actually skate minis. Although you wouldn't actually call this a mini because
it's bordering.
Yeah, what is it, 6 foot?
6 and 8 foot.
Yeah, 8 foot radius. Yeah, it's huge with an extension that is, what's that?
It's 8 foot.
8 foot.
Just goes to the
6 foot and 8 foot.
Yeah.
Right. So can you just briefly mention how this came about, how this private kind of things came about, and who designed it, and who built it, and how do you fund it?
Yeah, so a little bit of a story to it. It actually, I believe, right, Strong Rivers, it used to display in the DC shop in Torquay.
Oh yeah, right.
Which a well-known ramp builder, I don't know, you may have heard of him, Flaz, right, apparently built at some stage. They were going to remodel, this is my understanding, it may be true, it may not be true. They were going to remodel the shop. They rang up Flaz, they said, hey, do you want your ramp back? He said, yep, that's all right. They put it in another warehouse where surplus distribution was.
Right.
They decided to downsize their warehouse, and then the ramp had nowhere to go. So it was under tarps and stuff in Flaz's backyard.
Yep.
I was lucky enough to skate it a couple of times, and I just said, this is too good a ramp to have under tarp somewhere rotting away, and sort of come up with an idea around, hey, if a group of us put in and rented a shed, could we put it in there, sort of thing. And Flaz thought that was a good idea. So that's how 150 came about. Yep. So there was 10 of us. We posted up. So that's all the crackling and creaking is the heat expanding the shed at the moment. Yep. But so that's how 150 came about. And there was 10 of us in that. Now, we moved into a relatively new shed. Unbeknownst to us, the guy who owned the shed wanted to get a tenant so he could sell the shed, make it more... So what happened about 10 months after we'd got the ramp set up and everything like that, they gave us notification they were going to sell the shed. The shed sold, the people that bought the shed wanted to move into the shed, we needed to move out of the shed. So we had to go looking for another place.
And it's not a little ramp that you can just pop on a trailer and away you go.
No, it's not. So we ended up finding a bigger place and a bit more room. So the ramp got extended. This is how the 3 metres of vert either end got put on the ramp, is because we had a little bit more space. And I think there's now 12 of us that pay rent on the shed. And it costs us under $30 a week each to have this place. So every person gets a key. We've got a couple of rules around inviting guests and stuff like that. So you need to know the people that are going to be here. On certain nights, you can only invite one person. When people are coming, you need to post up we've got a private Facebook page, so you need to post up to let other people know who's coming, because we've all got kids and stuff like that. So you don't want to bring your kids along here if there's, some colourful language and that sort of stuff going down.
Yep.
That sort of thing. And we've also got a donation box that if people feel the need to donate, they can donate, and that actually helps us with maintaining the ramp. And we've put a couple of LED panels in for better lighting and stuff like that.
Oh, that's awesome
as well, and that's come out of the donations.
Yeah, and I've just been blinded by it because I looked at it. Yeah, right. So that's awesome. And I mean, it's almost. I know that somebody comes down here every Thursday night by the name of. He would normally come down. But
well, I haven't seen him for ages.
Yeah, I know.
Is that bloke still skating?
Yeah, I don't know actually. I wonder where you are, Tony. I'm just wondering because we haven't seen you anywhere skating.
I think he up at the Moss Jam and blitzed that, and then just went into his shell again, didn't he?
So. That's right. Yeah. But he was coming down here a lot, and he got me to come down here. I can only do backside kick turns, and then that's it.
They're pretty good backside kick turns, right?
Yeah, and then I get dizzy and fall off. Well, on that note. It's time for you to make a nomination for the next. Whether or not it's going to be this week, next week, the week after, or not, but we're putting it into a big bag of nominations that we're going to try and organise. So, who do you think, or who do you want to be interviewed?
Interesting enough, my interest comes from me seeing this kid as a grom.
Yeah.
Right. And he used to hang out at Werribee, and I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to get the time to interview him or not, but I'd really love to see Flaz.
Yep.
Flaz,
please.
I'd love to see Flaz interviewed. I reckon he's, about his side and his experience and where he's been.
Yeah.
And he's come out of that Werribee space, and I forgot to talk about the Werribee pipes.
Right.
We used to get into the Werribee pipes as well as the Finesford pipe, and so there's so much stuff out there, and I reckon he's just got so much history, and I'd love to hear about I'd love to hear about Flaz's story.
And I'm sure there's other people out there that would love to hear about it, because I know that in my travels I've just heard, I've heard people's names mentioned from down here, from where the Moss, all the way down to Eliza and all that, and just everywhere, and you kind of think, who are these people? I've heard the names, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of skaters that skated way back in the day that know a lot more about it than I do, but they would love to know. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there that would love to, that enjoyed hearing your story and have skated with you in the past but not knowing the whole story. So I think, in terms of Flaz, considering he's device, isn't he?
Yeah.
And
arguably Australia's best ramp builder.
Yeah, that's right. So ramp builder, designer, and also has got I've heard some funny stories about some things, back in the day.
Well,
what's his name? James Courtney? No. Anyway.
So there's a range of, there's a range that I'd love to hear from, but I think, Flaz is, that'd be pretty interesting.
That'd be cool. Well, you're going to have to help me out. Because I think I've met Flaz once, but we'll have to see if we can.
I'll see if I get my people to talk to his people, and we'll see what we.
That's right. And then you guys get back to your people, and then get back to me, and then we'll organise something. That'd be cool though. And I think we've got a couple of interviews coming up this next week coming up, so I'm hoping maybe early January. So Flaz, if you're listening and watching, let's pencil something in for early January, perhaps. That'd be awesome. But once again, thanks so much, Al, for having us in your private skate ramp.
Well, not just mine.
Communities, groups. But anyway, thanks so much for having us here. And we will see you guys hopefully on Thursday. We've got a special one, someone coming down from Catherine by the name of Shane George.
Oh, right.
So thanks again, Al.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you Thursday.
Yeah,
so many people.
And I forgot half of it.
Totally. That was amazing. You were like running.